Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the CSTV. I'm your host, Kathleen Igaltoto, Madam CS, and this is the Dictator series. Stay tuned and have it raw and real. April 20th, 1889. A boy child is born, and the world is not aware that this same boy could end up being the world's worst dictator few decades later. Adolf Hitler, the man behind the greatest Holocaust in world history, murdering over 6 million Jews in what was supposed to be the making of a pure German race. A man on a mission in the early 1920s to Munich to spy for the government. However, he ends up joining a group of anti-state individuals in a bar in Munich, the same individuals he was supposed to report about to the government. A group he transforms later to be his disciples, the Inner Circle, consisting of the First World War soldiers, writers and journalists, misfits and heroes, sycophants, people full of patriots whose actions greatly contributed to the making of the world's worst dictator, Hitler. A man who rises from just being a leader of the Nazi Party in 1921 to being the general leader in Germany in 1933 and eventually killing himself together with his partner in 1945. Famously known for the concentration camps and the murder of the Jews race in Austria, Germany, and Poland, this is the story of Adolf Hitler. Who was Hitler? Where was he born? How did he find himself in Germany, and how did he rise to the level of being the world's most dangerous dictator of the 20th century? Stay tuned and have it true and real. Adolf Hitler was an Australian-born German who reigned in Germany from 1933 to 1945 when he committed suicide. Perhaps the most important questions that we should be asking ourselves, and which are at the center of this particular episode, is: who was Adolf Hitler? Where was he born? How was he raised? How did he come to Germany? How did he come into power? And how did he gather this so much power to an extent that he became the world's famous dictator, killing millions of civilians and soldiers in what has been termed as the Holocaust? And this is the story of the world's famous dictator, Hitler. Adolf Hitler was born on the 20th of April 1889 in a place called Prernau am in Austria-Hungary and raised in a place called Linz. The young Hitler was the fourth-born of the 6 children of his father. When he was 3 years old, the family moved to Passau in Germany. It is here that he acquired the Lower Bavarian dialect that characterized his speech throughout his life. It is important to note that Hitler lived in Vienna later in the first decade of 1900s. However, in 1913, he moved to Germany. He was decorated in the service in the German army during the First World War that started in 1914 and ended in 1918. 1 year after the First World War, Adolf Hitler in 1919 joined the German Workers' Party, the DAP, which was a precursor of the Nazi Party. In 1921, the youthful Hitler was appointed the leader of the Nazi Party. And in 1923, he tried to seize government power in a failed coup in Munich. He was imprisoned with a 5-year jail term. It is while Hitler was in prison that he wrote his autobiography, My Struggles. However, he was released in 1924. After prison, Hitler gained a lot of popularity. This was because of several reasons. One, he attacked the Treaty of Versailles. Remember, the Versailles Treaty after the end of the First World War put a lot of costs and blame on Germany for the outbreak of the First World War. In a nutshell, it was taken as if Germany lost, and on top of the loss, Germany was fined and was to pay a huge cost because of being blamed as the starter or as the trigger of the First World War. Secondly, Hitler promoted pan-Germanism, anti-Semitism, and anti-communism with charismatic oratory and Nazi propaganda. He frequently denounced international capitalism and communism as part of the Jews' conspiracy. So, as early as 1924, Hitler had already started speaking his mind. He was anti-capitalist, he was anti-communism, but more importantly, he was anti-Jews. And all the time, he associated capitalism and communism to the Jews, who he believed that was supposed to be eradicated or eliminated or sent away from Germany to make a pure German race. By 1932, the Nazi Party had most seats in the Reichstag, but did not have the majority. And this is how Hitler comes into power. As a result, no party was able to produce a chancellor. The former chancellor, Transition Papa, and other conservative leaders persuaded the president, Paul von Hindenburg, to appoint Hitler as the chancellor on the 30th of January 1933. So Hitler comes into power not because of an election, but because the leaders, the former chancellor and the president, Paul von Hindenburg, appoints him into the position. So through the Enabling Act of 1933, the Weimar Republic was transformed into the Nazi Germany, a one-party dictatorship based on totalitarianism and autocratic Nazism ideology. So when Hitler comes into power, now the Weimar Republic of Germany now changes to a one-party Nazi Germany. And this one-party Nazi Germany is marked with dictatorship and authoritarianism that are mad and configured within the Nazi ideologies. And we're talking about these Nazi ideologies. We mean ideologies that were against communism, against capitalism, and more importantly, ideologies that felt or presented the idea that the German race was supposed to be a pure race, devoid of any other races, and therefore individuals and other races like the Jews were supposed to be eliminated. In 1934, when Hindenburg died, Hitler replaced him as the head of the state of government. His aim was to eliminate the Jews in Germany and establish a new order devoid of the race and Britain dominion. Hitler achieved a lot within his first 6 years of power, which gave him significant support. It is important to note that before he made Germany wars, he had his own achievements, and this included Germany rapidly recovered from the Great Depression. Remember, from 1929, the world faces the Great Depression. The world is recovering from the effects of the First World War. The Depression hit, and when Hitler comes into power, he was able to assist Germany rise or recover from this Great Depression. Secondly, there was abrogation of the fines imposed on Germany after the First World War. Remember, with the Versailles Treaty, some fines were imposed on Germany because it was claimed to be the start of the First World War. So during Hitler's reign, these were also abrogated. And there was also the annexation of territories inhabited by German ethnic groups. It was able to expand somehow the German territory. However, it is important to note that Hitler's aggression and the desire to expand Germany is considered the primary cause of the Second World War as from 1939. September 1st, 1939, he invaded Poland, and as a result, Britain and France declared war on Germany in June 1941. He also invaded the Soviet Union, and in December the same year, he declared war on the USA. By the end of 1941, German troops and European Axis powers called the shots in Northern Europe and Northern Africa. It was actually sunrise on Hitler's side. However, this sunrise did not last for long. The gains were first after 1941, and in 1945, when the Allied armies defeated the German army. On the 29th of April 1945, Hitler married the love of his life, Eva Braun, in the Führer bunker in Berlin. You need to understand one thing here. In the Führer bunker, where Hitler and some of his close allies were in 1945, was actually a hiding place. At this particular time, many of the people who were very close to Hitler had lost. Hitler had his own inner circle, and this inner circle can be traced way back to 1921 in Munich, a time when Hitler actually had gone to spy for the government, but ended up to be part of a group that was conspiring against the government. As time went by, Hitler could wave and make these anti-government individuals part of his inner circle. They were not so many. They were around 6 individuals, and they consisted of ex-soldiers, journalists, etc. And each of these individuals fought hard to be closer to Hitler. And it is the fight among these Hitler's inner circle that actually prepared and gave more power to Hitler to an extent that he became the dictator in Germany. A dictator who actually killed thousands, millions of Jews in what was termed as making Germany a pure race. It is important to note that in 1945, by the time Hitler and his group is entering the Führer's bunker in Berlin, Hitler has no forward or backward. Hitler is a cornered man at this particular time. Some of his allies had been arrested in the United Kingdom, that is in Britain. He had seen the Soviet troops and the enemies coming closer and closer to Germany. He had no option. He didn't want to go outside and die such a humiliative death from his enemies. He also chose not to go to his house in the Bavaria. He had a very big house, a very big palace, all floors in the Bavaria that had been constructed by one of his inner circles. However, he chose to remain in Berlin, in the Führer's bunker. With him in this particular bunker was one person who was never so much throughout Hitler's reign, put into the public domain his lover, Eva. Eva Braun was taken more of a small kind type of a prostitute. She lived her life. She loved drinking, smoking, etc. And she loved partying a lot. Many times are those that she spent with the wives of those men who constituted Hitler's inner circle in the Pafalia, drinking, partying, and enjoying life at their best. If Eva Braun was never spoken about in public, either by Hitler or his inner circle or friends, it is until 1945, when things were getting worse and it was sunset in Hitler's empire, that we see Eva Braun with Hitler in the Führerspanga in Berlin. So on the 29th of April 1945, when Hitler sees that nothing is left of him, he marries the love of his life in a private ceremony within the hiding place. 2 days later, the couple committed suicide to avoid capture by the Soviet Red Union, and their corpses were burnt. So Hitler marries today. 2 days later, he enters into a chamber with his wife, and the inner circle, all the friends, all the allies of Hitler who were with him in the Führerspanga in Berlin, hear gunshots. When they go to check, Hitler had killed himself and killed the wife too. So, and that marked the end of Hitler. He was the most feared man in Europe as far as dictatorship and the abuse of people's human rights was concerned. The man Hitler, the man who made the world today to have the celebration of the Holocaust, the man who, despite not having his origin in Germany, could make Germany to stand out as one of the countries in history that ever slaughtered and killed people in the name that they did not belong either to skin color, political ideology, opinions, or even sexuality. A man who, when you look at the concentration camps, what you can only see and reflect upon is the pain and the agony of the people that were his. Hitler is described as the embodiment of modern political evil. Under his leadership, the Nazi regime was responsible for the genocide of over 6 million Jews and other victims who all his followers regarded as subhuman. He and his regime also killed around 19.3 million civilians and prisoners of war. It is not actually a small number. Millions of soldiers and civilians also died as a result of military action in European theater. These deaths consist the deadliest Holocaust in the world's history. It is important to note that Hitler spared nobody. He was also against the LGBTQ community, and among the people who died under Hitler were the LGBTQ people. And one could wonder, how did Hitler actually carry out these killings? There were so many concentration camps and chambers throughout Germany, Poland, and the German territories at that particular time. And in these chambers, people were hanged, others were killed by gases, others were burnt, depending on what the dictator felt was good for you. I traveled to one of the concentration camps in Berlin to give you this story. Entered this particular room, that could be the end of your life. The execution, either through all time, electricity, or etc. Whatever Hitler so nice that would eliminate you. Some wouldn't even opportunity to parley the people who were executed in this room, while others received a bill to bury the bodies of their beloved ones who had been executed here. It is a sad state of a history that was built on bloodshed. And it is also important to note that both men and women were killed, including children. Everybody who was against the Nazi regime was killed. Those that Hitler considered aliens were killed. And to date, a lot about Germany in terms of history is told. And one history that remains paramount is the history of the Holocaust. Throughout Germany, there are several concentrated camps that have been turned into historical memorial sites where people go to see what actually dictatorship and racial discrimination can do to human beings and human lives. This is among the almost 20 centers of execution that Hitler had in Germany. And in this center alone, over 2,000 people were executed. The reasons varied from that one of refusing to go to war in support of Nazism, or basically being against the Nazist ideology. So many of these exist in the whole of Germany. And the question could be, how is it easy to forget such a history mated and built on bloodshed? And it is important to note that despite the fact that Hitler died, the memories of the Holocaust still lives alive among the family members, among the people that actually lost their beloved ones, and among the generation of young men and women who have come to see what actually the Holocaust was. This urn contains the soil from the German concentration camps, and the concentration camps were some of the execution chambers that were used by Hitler in executing the Jews and other people who never supported Nazism. It is not just something to look at and say it is beautiful, it is unique, but with these soils comes the memories of the cries, of the pain, and of the agony that the victims of Hitler the Dictator went through. It is important also to note that a family was responsible for paying the burial costs and the execution costs of their own. This implies very simple. For example, if Hitler killed your family member in his execution chambers, he will serve you with an invoice of the amount of money that you are supposed to pay to get the body and bury the body, or the amount of money that you're supposed to pay for the execution that has just taken place. So you can imagine it is double pain. You have lost your beloved one who has been killed, but at the same time you are supposed to pay the cost for the burial or for the disposal of the body. It's an exhibition center that documents the history of this Gultime Center. In this execution room, you come across the several photos and information of various men who were executed during the Hitler's reign in Germany. These men and women not only came from Germany, but also from other different countries. And one could wonder, with all this history very live in the lives of the people who lost their beloved ones, who lost their fellow nationalists, will there ever be a history of reconciliation and in Europe? Could we ever have a situation whereby we say we have forgotten the past, but come to think of it, How are you going to forget this? How are you going to forget the famous men and women who have been executed? But more painfully, how are you going to forget when you come to this particular place and find a pill that was sent to somebody whose family member was executed here, yet was meant to pay for that particular body to be buried? It is not easy, because in history we say it is the study of the past, but some memories still reign live and fresh in our present. The history of the Holocaust in Germany, it is a history that should be told and retold again and again. It's a history of racial discrimination. It's a history of Chinkoism as opposed to nationalism. It's a history of murder, where one race felt so superior than the other. It is a typical of a good example of power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.